Okay, let's dive into this. What if Thanos was actually the real guardian of the galaxy? Now I know, that sounds like absolute madness at first, right? We are so conditioned to view certain characters through a very specific, traditional lens, but I want us to engage in a slow, philosophical analysis of what the word protector actually means. Does a protector just punch the bad guy standing right in front of them? Or does a protector look at the grand, cosmic scale and make the impossible, genuinely horrifying choices that literally no one else is willing to make?
To figure that out, we've got a very clear roadmap for our breakdown today. First, we'll define the real Guardian. Then, we'll unmask the Guardian's selfish motives. Third, we'll explore the tragedy of Titan. Fourth, we'll examine the undeniable math of destruction. Fifth, we'll look at the ultimate sacrifice. And finally, we'll ask, monster or visionary? We are going to deconstruct these character motives and this cosmic math step by step.
So let's kick things off with Section 1, The Real Guardian, Deconstructing the Mad Titan. Through this first section, I really need you to temporarily forget everything you assume about the being we all call the Mad Titan. History made him a villain. I want to linger on that quote for a second because it is incredibly powerful. History, as they say, is written by the victors. In the context of this specific source material, the narrative that survives is the one that labels him simply as a monster. But history's narrative is a lens that might actually be blinding us to the objective truth of his actions. When a society is fundamentally terrified of a harsh reality, well, the easiest thing to do is to label the person pointing out that reality as a villain. The source material makes a really striking claim here. What if he was the solitary figure actually looking at the bigger picture? The text points out that while everyone else in the galaxy was completely absorbed, just busy in their own little worlds, Thanos was the only one seeing the actual truth of the cosmic situation. While everyone else was obsessing over a single leaf, or, in the case of some heroes, obsessing over dance-offs and stealing prosthetic legs, Thanos was looking at the entire burning forest. He possessed a macro-level awareness in a universe that was strictly focused on the micro. Which brings us to Section 2, The Guardian's Selfish Motives, Unmasking the Protectors. Now what's really interesting here is when we flip the mirror onto the so-called heroes. This forces us to scrutinize their initial introductions, which we so often view through rose-colored glasses. Let's break down the specific negligence of each character exactly as the source lays it out. When we first see them, do they actually look like protectors to you? Look at Star-Lord. He is actively stealing an Infinity Stone. For a beginner to this lore, an Infinity Stone isn't just some shiny rock. It's essentially a cosmic weapon of mass destruction capable of wiping out entire planets. And he doesn't even know what its power is. He's just going to sell it to the highest bidder. That is cosmic level recklessness. Then we have Rocket and Groot. They're bounty hunters. Their motivation? Purely financial. Catch anyone as long as it pays the bills. And Gamora, when we meet her, she's working for the very people threatening the galaxy, focused entirely on setting up her own deal. There's no grand altruistic design here. There is literally just self-interest, greed, and individual agendas. And that brings us to this incredibly sharp realization, a coincidental heroism. The truth is, absolutely none of them came to save the galaxy. None of them woke up with a mission to protect the innocent. They merely reacted. They only became guardians because the problem literally dropped right onto their heads. They were just there. Their heroism is entirely a byproduct of circumstance, not some proactive moral stance. Moving on to Section 3, The Tragedy of Titan, a future already seen. This part requires us to shift our focus entirely over to Thanos' background. We need to unpack the profound, unimaginable trauma that forged his entire ideology. And this brilliantly illustrates the core thematic contrast of our whole explainer. On one side you have the Guardians, fundamentally reactive. They act only when forced by immediate, personal danger. On the exact opposite side, you have Thanos, fundamentally proactive. He isn't waiting around for a problem to hit him. He's actively working to prevent a horrific future that he has already witnessed firsthand. It's the complete inverse of coincidental heroism. To truly understand his proactivity, we have to look at how his homeworld Titan actually fell. It wasn't destroyed by a massive enemy army. It wasn't obliterated by an alien invasion. It was destroyed by a silent, creeping killer. The undeniable, quiet math of population growth versus resources. The source points out that this isn't comic book magic. It's a terrifyingly relatable, real-world issue of overpopulation and starvation. The people kept growing, the resources ran out, and one day, everything just finished. It was a simple, devastating problem of numbers. He wasn't guessing the future, he saw it. I really want you to feel the gravity of this quote from our source. His entire crusade is not based on some wild academic theory. It is deeply rooted in the lived trauma of watching his entire world suffocate to death while he was left as the absolute solitary survivor. He knows exactly how the story ends because he lived through the final chapter. Next up, Section 4, The Math of Destruction, the Logistics of Planetary Collapse. Let's look objectively at the cause and effect breakdown of Titan's fall, so we can really visualize exactly what Thanos processed. Think of this like a step-by-step scientific breakdown. It's impartial, cold mathematics. The problem was clear: a constantly growing population coupled with rapidly depleting resources. And the result? The total destruction of Titan, leaving Thanos completely alone. This is the exact logical progression that Thanos witnessed. It's an equation where the output is inevitable extinction.
So what did he do when he saw this math playing out? He proposed a solution, a harsh, extreme solution. Eliminate exactly half the population so that balance will come. Now, the source doesn't ask us to agree with this horrifying method, but it does ask us to acknowledge the cold, calculated math behind it. Frame this strictly within those cause and effect logistics we just talked about. If resources are fixed and the population is the variable causing the destruction, having the variable mathematically solves the equation. It is absolutely brutal, yes, but geometrically logical. But what did his people do? They labeled him as crazy. They literally called him mad. And there is a deep, agonizing irony here. They dismissed him, ignored the math entirely, and right before his exact mathematical prediction wiped them all out, they called him insane. His world ended precisely the way he said it would, proving his terrifying theory as absolute fact.
Which brings us to the climax of our analysis. Section 5, The Ultimate Sacrifice, the Burden of the Snap. So the crucial point is, why did Thanos take the localized tragedy of Titan and apply its brutal lesson to the entire galaxy? Well, Thanos looked out at the vastness of space and saw that it wasn't just Titan. The entire universe was repeating Titan's exact mistake. He wasn't just looking at one planet. He was looking at trillions of planets, all walking blindly toward the exact same mathematical destruction. He saw the macro version of the micro tragedy he had already survived. This realization forced an impossible, brutal ultimatum. From the perspective presented in the source, this wasn't about cruelty, it was the ultimate necessary solution. The choice was completely binary. End half today, or sit back and let absolutely everything end tomorrow. Between 50% survival and 0% survival, well, the math dictates a clear, though agonizing path. He made himself a villain so that history could survive. Think about the immense weight of this analysis for a second. What did Thanos actually do for the generations of beings who don't even exist yet? He willingly took on the burden of eternal hatred. And let's be super clear on why he's hated. This action meant dusting away people's loved ones, friends, and families. It's a catastrophic event for anyone living through it. Yet he accepted that paradoxical burden. He sacrificed his own morality and his own reputation, totally embracing the role of the ultimate villain, strictly to ensure that a future could even exist to judge him. Finally, Section 6, Monster or Visionary, the Final Verdict. We've spent this explainer building a really complex dialectic, haven't we? Contrasting selfish, reactive heroes with a brutal, mathematically driven antagonist. Let's synthesize what we've uncovered and walk through these final takeaways slowly. First, the Guardians, the ones we celebrate as heroes, acted largely out of circumstance. They were just there when the problem fell on them. Second, Thanos, the one condemned as a villain, acted out of a cold, proven mathematical certainty. And finally, he embraced that villain role deliberately to ensure cosmic survival. The very definition of a protector completely shifts depending on whether you value immediate localized safety or harsh, long-term mathematical balance. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. Based on absolutely everything we've broken down today, the math, the trauma, the stark contrast with the reactive heroes, was Thanos merely a monster? Or was he the only human who actually had the cosmic vision to see what had to be done? It's a question that forces us to re-examine what heroism and sacrifice truly mean. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narrative and keep analyzing the math.